Line of Fire with your host, Dr. Micharl Brown, your voice of moral, cultural, and spiritual revolution. Here again is Dr. Micharl Brown.
So we know what's wrong with our culture and what's wrong with our schools and what the left is doing and what the gay activists are doing. We are big on what's wrong and pointing out our grievances, but what are we doing to bring about positive change? Do we know how to bring about positive change? Or are we concerned that we might be too Christian and we want to be meek and mild and gracious, and in the meantime, maybe a radical sex ed curriculum gets steamrolled through our schools, and now we're complaining about it, whereas we didn't really do anything to push against it? What can we do? This is Micharl Brown. You are listening to or watching the Line of Fire broadcast, and I am speaking now with Arthur Schaper. I knew Arthur first as a fellow conservative columnist, and I knew of Mass Resistance with some of the leaders there over the years, based in Massachusetts, but then spreading to other parts of the country. And I would sometimes have leaders on from Mass Resistance, Brian, Amy, and they would talk about what they were doing in Massachusetts to push back against radical curricula, agenda, different things, to expose error, to expose what was happening in our society. And little by little, I began to see Mass Resistance growing in different places and then winning more and more victories. And then I saw that Arthur was actually part of what was happening and part of this positive news. So Arthur, at long last, welcome to the Line of Fire.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brown. Great to be here.
So first, tell me what Mass Resistance is, or tell our listeners, for those not familiar with what Mass Resistance is, and then what are you doing to make a difference?
So Mass Resistance, we are the international pro-family, anti-LGBT group. We make the difference. Brian Kammacher began this organization as the Parents' Rights Coalition. Brian's a good friend of yours. I know you've had him on the show before. It started in 1993. He was fighting the perverse sex ed curriculum that was forced upon his kids. This was in Newton, Massachusetts. And at the time, there wasn't even an opt-out law. So Brian and parents mobilized, organized. They fought the school board to stop this. And then they mobilized statewide. They pressured the still very liberal Democratic legislature to enact an opt-out law. And from there, the Parents' Rights Coalition turned into Mass Resistance. There was a growing recognition that this LGBT agenda was pushing for more ground, more preeminence in many facets of our daily lives, not just in the schools. So I came on board. I was initially a columnist. As you mentioned, I've written for Town Hall. I was also a Free Alliance correspondent for Rhode Island and Massachusetts. I had learned about the GLSEN program, gay, lesbian, GLSEN, Gay Lesbian Student Education Network.
Yeah, Gay Lesbian Straight Education Network. That was the name of it. Yeah.
Oh, excuse me. Thank you so much. And I was just shocked to what extent they were pushing this LGBT perversion into the schools, teaching kids they could be gay, transgender, et cetera. I started reporting on it. Then I stopped freelancing for New England. Then later on, I became really alarmed about what Target was enacting, that they were going to allow biological men to go into women's bathrooms, restrooms, fitting rooms. And Brian said, well, we are trying to expand operations in different states. And they had a Virginia chapter at the time. And he said, you want to take the lead in California. So I served as a volunteer director for California Mass Resistance. We had considerable victory, shining a deep spotlight on what Target was doing. I started in my own hometown here in the city of Torrance, protesting outside of Target. We told customers they're letting men go into women's restrooms and fitting rooms, and customers said, okay, I can go somewhere else. So we started having an impact there, and we stopped a horrific law, Senate Bill 1146. This is a bill that would have limited the Title IX exemptions for religious schools so that they could only discuss natural marriage, life, and family within the context of religious training, but all the other coursework and programs had to allow for homosexual and transgender propaganda, Transgenders would be allowed to use whatever fitting rooms, restrooms they wanted to. There would have to be a full promotion of homosexual sexuality. Gay students would be able to have their partners on the campuses, etc. It would have been an absolutely devastating blow to Christian and private education throughout the state. We were successful at forcing the bill back so that it just turned into an advertising requirement. And since then, from there, I've now been hired full-time as the organization director for Mass Resistance. I help to form chapters in the different states and also around the world. We have chapters operating in Canada, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Great Britain. We have chapters in Nigeria. We've worked with people in Chile, Costa Rica, and even South Africa. Yes.
So Arthur, this is very encouraging, positive news. And friends, if you don't know about Mass Resistance, go there now, massresistance.org, spelled just like it sounds, massresistance.org. So Arthur, I want to be totally candid with you and with everyone tuning into this broadcast. God's raised me up as a voice. I've been effective in communicating the urgent issues with giving people necessary information. So not just sounding the alarm, but equipping, helping, strengthening. But I am not primarily an on-the-ground grassroots activist, say that's going to rally people, for this to vote on a certain thing with the school board or to push back against radical legislation in the government. What I'll do, by God's grace, is raise the issue, critique the issue, get the necessary information out, audio, video, article, book, equip people, but others have to be the on-the-ground strategists, just like with the pro-life movement. I'm not the one that's there on the ground telling that mother that decides to have her child, okay, let's hook you up with this one, and we're going to help get your baby shower here, and these folks are going to help work with you in the early years when your child's born. That's not me. So I have looked for years for ways to point people, okay, what do we do? What do we do in the local area? What do we do with the school board? What do we do here? And a lot of Christians just don't know what to do. And I know that's not all Christians working with Mass Resistance, but Arthur, what you folks are doing plays such an important role, gives the outlet, gives the strategy, gives the tools.
Yes, I mean, there's so much we can talk about. I mean, ever since I've come on board, God's really blessed me. I mean, I was in the right place at the right time. Brian had hired somebody else to serve as I basically stepped into a position that I've helped create. Brian knew that he needed to have somebody else to connect with and foster chapters in different states to fight this perverse agenda at the local level, county, and state level. And that's where I've come in. We started out, I stepped in. I have contacts with activists throughout California, obviously, conservatives on other issues, but I've also been able to network with people in New England and other parts of the country. And my profile on social media has enabled me to connect with individuals too. Mass Resistance, we have been instrumental in stopping reparative therapy bans in many of the states, including in California. Your audience needs to know that we are like the liberal LGBT cesspool here in California, and we have stopped 3 years in a row a reparative therapy ban that would ban the practice for adults. It's already been banned for minors.
Yeah, and in other words, if you're same-sex attracted and want professional counseling to help get to the root of your same-sex attraction and find a lessening or changing those desires, not only is that illegal for minors in California, even with parental consent, California is trying to make it illegal for anyone of any age. That's correct. And the bill, AB 2943, was so broad in scope, it would have banned the Bible. That is exactly it. I network with activists and churches up and down the state. We hammered the legislature. We didn't give up. We didn't say, oh, I guess it's going to go to the governor's desk. We better just go after Jerry Brown to veto it. No, we were committed to stopping this. We targeted the right legislators, and at the last minute, the LGBT activist legislator pushing this bill pulled it at the last minute. We did not stop there, though. We continued to pursue that lawmaker, and we said, how dare you try to ban a therapy that saves lives? How dare you force adults to be trapped in lifestyles, behaviors, and emotional trauma that cuts their lifespan short or even kills them? And that's a point that I think is fundamentally unique about Mass Resistance compared to other pro-family groups. Many groups are about publishing, educating, holding conferences, informing people. But we want to agitate,
energize and organize people to do something about this. The left understands this. It is, to me, very uncommon. It's very rare that you'll have people on the left just having one conference or one convocation after another to discuss the serious philosophical implications of an issue. They get into the trenches, they go after the politicians, and they advance their policy goals. We on the right, especially in the pro-family movement, must do the same. Mass resistance, we're the only group really doing this. We are not afraid to point out the inherent destructive aspects of homosexual conduct itself. We point out not just the harms and the long-standing dangers to individual liberties and community morality, but that the behaviors themselves are inherently destructive. And what we saw over the past 6 years, we've seen this attitude of the argument was always based on tradition or personal preference or religion. Well, I believe that marriage is for one man and one woman. And we witness time and again how the pro-family leadership or the information leadership on this issue could not respond to fundamental questions like, well, what difference does it make what two consenting adults do in the privacy of their own room? We have the answers to this. We provide those answers to our parents. We explain to our activists how this is a global agenda that has a vicious outcome, that is pernicious, destructive, and it is not going to stop until and we're not just interested in holding our ground, we want to take territory back. And that to me is essential. In California, as of now, I'm fighting to repeal the ban on reparative therapy for minors. I'm taking the lead on it, relying on the changing Supreme Court and federal court culture to assist us. And to me, what mass resistance has done is we just impart this to the parents. We impart this to otherwise, we find that a lot of conservative people, they want to fight for life. They want to fight for family issues, the Second Amendment, et cetera. But when it comes to this LGBT issue, they get immediately scared off. There is so much threats and bullying that comes from the LGBT lobby. They have relied on some very smooth-selling talking points, and our side doesn't want to cut to the core of this. No, you're not born gay. In every instance, there is some trace of abuse, whether it's emotional neglect, emotional abuse, or sexual abuse. We're not afraid to say that. We have
right, hang on right there, Arthur. You're on a roll, but we've got a break. We'll be right back speaking with Arthur Schaper from Mass Resistance. Check out massresistance.org. And even if it just gives you ideas, you may have a different way of approaching things. But what can you do in your city, in your state, in your home community, in your school to make a positive difference? We'll be right back.
It's The Line of Fire with your host, activist, author, international speaker, and theologian, Dr. Micharl Brown. Your voice of moral, cultural, and spiritual revolution. Get into The Line of Fire now by calling 866-34-TRUTH. Here again is Dr. Micharl Brown.
Thanks, friends, for joining us on The Line of Fire. I'm speaking with Arthur Schaper with Mass Resistance, MASS resistance.org online. And Schaper is spelled Chaper. I should have said that at the beginning. If they're looking for you, Arthur, they'll be spelling it wrong. Hey, what have you done in terms of different cities with drag queen reading hours in libraries?
Oh, absolutely. And just to correct the record, my last name is Schaper, German last name. It means shepherd. So if people want to look up my last name, Schaper.
Got it. Thank you.
At any rate, so we have this this perverse abomination allowing explicit sex entertainers to go into public libraries to read, really indoctrinate and groom children. One of them admitted it in Lafayette, Louisiana. Mass Resistance has taken an aggressive approach to stop it, not just to protest it. Our first success was in Atlanta, Georgia, of all places. This was in September 2018. We have a robust team there in Georgia that went to great lengths to inform the businesses and the general public in the Ponce de Leon section of Atlanta, Georgia. Your audience may not be aware, but even in the South, in red states, the urban areas are very liberal, and Atlanta, Georgia is like the gay capital of the South, essentially. But we stepped in and we pushed back on it. We got it canceled there. Tracy Shannon, our Texas Mass Resistance chapter chair, has done phenomenal work. She first targeted Houston's Drag Queen Story Hour program. She and other activists rounded up numerous people to protest, to raise alarm about this perverse program. And it was our activists that found out that not one, but two of these drag queens were sex offenders. One of them had sexually assaulted an 8-year-old boy, and the other had sexually assaulted 4 children. No background checks were done. There were no safeguard measures taken into account. And because of the massive, not just national, but international media firestorm which followed, Houston had to cancel the drag queen program entirely. Then Tracy, another activist in Austin, Texas, again, a very liberal enclave in a red state, discovered that the main drag queen there, Mr. David Lee Richardson, otherwise known as Miss Kitty Litter, was also a criminal sex deviant. He was convicted of male prostitution. Drag Queen Story Hour pushes this idea of queer role models and teaching gender fluidity. What it really is pushing perverts, predators, pedophiles into safe spaces, spaces that should be safe for children to learn about reading. This is about grooming. This is about indoctrination. We discovered other drag queens in Maryland who were following porn sites and retweeting the content and promoting prostitution businesses in the Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, D.C. metro. These are role models for children? No. This is nothing but the perverse, this is the Jezebel spirit, as you refer to it in your book. This is the spirit of sexual immorality, decadence, and many of these drag queens have incredible connections, disturbing connections to Satanism and the occult. We exposed this about another drag queen. This was Anthony Hudson, who was based out of Portland, Oregon. This guy has all kinds of connections to horrific witchcraft, and we exposed him. We had our Nevada chapter confront this perversion in some of the suburbs of Las Vegas. I went onto a radio program with the Las Vegas, it's called the Vegas Take. These were very liberal radio hosts who basically think it's okay for men to wear dresses and want to read to kids, as long as they're not, quote unquote, doing anything wrong. And yet we have seen a pattern time and again with the drag queens and their promoters and other LGBT activists. There is a long strain of sexual deviance and criminal conduct that is in their wake. We just released our latest report on a West Virginia LGBT activist, a man named Dee McIntosh, pushing for a non-discrimination ordinance in a suburb of Morgantown, West Virginia. And this man was a repeat sex offender who had molested numerous children when he was a teacher in the Monongalia County School. This is a disturbing, unmistakable pattern in the whole LGBT agenda. There's sexual deviance, sexual criminal conduct, harm, abuse. Drag entertainment itself is illicit. It has no business being around kids. If I may be so bold, it has no business being around adults. And I'm going to use I really appreciate you allowing me to be on the program. We've got a problem now that even on the right, like with Charlie Kirk and the Turning Point USA, they think drag queens are okay, just as long as they're against drag queens for kids. No, none of it's acceptable. And we see this even with conservative circles. They want to normalize LGBT behaviors and LGBT themes as some new movement into identity politics. This is wrong. It's destructive. There may be some conflict here. I support much of what President Trump has done as a policy. His rhetoric has been, pro-LGBT in a marginal way, but his policies have been pro-family. He has removed all the LGBT protections. He has banned transgender troops. This is the kind of movement, however, that needs to continue long after President Trump is no longer in office. We need our governors and our county and city officials and school officials to stop promoting this LGBT insanity. Mass Resistance, we had an incredible victory again in California. This was in Downey, California. It is a suburb, majority minority city south of Los Angeles. We fought for 5 months, and the school board gave up and relented. They had selected a perverse, incredibly morally inappropriate, medically inaccurate sex ed curriculum, and we pushed hard, demanding that they get rid of it. We actually walked precincts and connected with homeowners, parents, and city leaders in Downey to contact and put pressure on the school board to remove it. That's what mass resistance does. We resist massively this perverse LGBT agenda in full. We call it out for what it is. We refuse to be bullied. And yes, I'm sure you're aware of this. You know, there's this hate group in Alabama that really hates us. And I'm not talking about the Ku Klux Klan. It has a nice sounding name. They call themselves the Southern Poverty Law Center. They are a notorious hate group that targets Jews, that targets Muslims. And well, they are just pulling their hair out because they see that we have grown and become more effective in fighting this LGBT perverse agenda. And they're just desperate, and they realize that their hateful lies, they attack, I mean, it's anti-Semitic. They attack my boss, who is an Orthodox Jew. You, sir, are also Jewish. It's just shocking to me. The lengths they go to smear parents, veterans, immigrants, men and women of faith who don't want their children perverted. I want to give a special shout out to my San Diego mass resistance community, Tony Villafranca, Filipino-American, Lily Abear of Mexican descent as well. She's a lady who has fought hard. We fought very hard in Chula Vista. We had a press conference calling out this LGBT insanity in full. We had a couple of those LGBT activists try to shout us down. It was so disgusting. They tried to silence a black pastor. And I'm like, what's going on here? Am I in like segregationist Alabama? I was shocked at how bigoted and hateful the LGBT activists were. And I remember questioning them. And I said, you think it's okay? Do you think it's okay for sex offenders to be around children? They refused to answer my question.
Yeah, and you know, Arthur, and obviously you're passionate and have so much to say on this. That's a point that we've made for years. Look at the trajectory. Where is this going? Yeah. And if we told someone, you know, look, your average American wants to be fair-minded, doesn't want to seem like they're being discriminatory. Hey, I've got a cousin who's gay, he's a really nice guy, and he said he's born this way, and I don't want to be bigoted, and, you know, so people want to be tolerant and so on. And when you say, okay, here's where this goes, here's the trajectory, this is where it ends up.
And
yeah, go ahead.
I know we're running out of time, so I'll go really quick here. But see, here's the thing, you know, that has, I found, that's been the weakest point. Someone will say, I know someone who's gay. And then my response is, you'll be surprised to know this. We actually have homosexuals who contact our main office in Waltham, Massachusetts, and they tell us, we agree with everything you're doing. We know we were not born this way. Many of them are afraid to get out of the lifestyle because of the LGBT lobby, which is more vicious than even, you know, brown shirts and Nazis. They go after anybody who wants to step out of line and say there's something wrong with all of this, or who more so want to get out of it. Kevin Witt is a former homosexual and drag queen, for example. He's the leader of our Dallas chapter. He is unafraid to tell people, I was molested as a kid. They put alcohol on me, you know, and then he went into the drag culture, which is explicitly illicit, terrible, destructive. No kid should be around it. Robert Oscar Lopez, Bobby Lopez, he was on the Eric Metaxas show. He's a contact of ours with Mass Resistance. He has not been afraid, and this is a discussion that's emerging.
Yeah, and Arthur, yeah, just got to jump in. Yeah, and Bobby's been on my show as well. Listen, we're out of time, but obviously go on for hours. Passionate about these things. The whole thing, I mentioned Mass Resistance and Jezebel's war with America, is to say you have to stand and you have to push back. You have to stand, you have to push back. Hey, Arthur, thank you for joining us. The last name, Schaper, I left the C out, I guess, S-C-H-A-P-E-R. So you can connect with Arthur on social media, massresistance.org. Hey, thank you, sir, for being with us. Much appreciated. And listen, I've been targeted by the SPLC. I have. I mean, they'll say they stand against anti-Semitism and hate groups that they will not expose the radical Islamic groups. That they actually put on their hate list a Muslim who was exposing radical extremist Islam. Yeah. Anyway, let truth triumph. You find your way of following Jesus, of being honoring to the Lord, his ways, his methods, and at the same time pushing back against unrighteousness, darkness. Let's put everything on the table. Let the agendas be known. Let everything come to light.